Welcome to another edition of our program, World Views. It's a pleasure to have you, and we'll appreciate to have your comments from the world over. Our guest today is Mr. Ndifor Ferdinand, and Mr. Ndifor Ferdinand is a person who is well versed on international and national news, and he most often expresses his on here and sometimes on social media, in particular on Facebook. So he's going to be our main guest today, and the focus of our program today will be on two East African countries, Kenya and Rwanda. Mr. Ndifor, it's a pleasure to have you here as guest today.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you for the invitation.
How are you doing?
I'm fine.
Great. Well, before we start our debate, we will want to introduce our editorial, but before then, you will have our editorial just after this. Our editorial today, we are focusing on two countries, Rwanda and Kenya. The first will be holding its general election on the 4th of August, that is tomorrow, while the second, that is Kenya, will be holding hers on the 8th of August, that is 4 days after Rwanda. In the case of Rwanda, there are two candidates, incumbent Paul Kagame, credited to have stopped the 1994 genocide. He is running against little-known Frank Habineza of the DGP party, or Democratic Green Party. In Kenya, the competitors are Uhuru Kenyatta, who is the flag bearer of the Jubilee Party or coalition, and Raila Odinga, former Prime Minister and standard bearer of the NASA coalition. That is where the comparison between Rwanda and Kenya ends. Rwanda's own election, to quote the online edition of Bloomberg, will be a mere formality for the incumbent Paul Kagame. And this must not be considered as mere Paul Kagame bashing. While Africa and the world are full of praise for Paul Kagame because of his prudent economic management and transformation of the country of 12 million, what is too often shifted under the carpet are the gross human rights violations taking place in Rwanda. What Paul Kagame and all those supporting him must know is that no matter how best Rwanda is and will be managed, long-lasting peace cannot be achieved if a majority of the citizens of that country are considered as second-class citizens. People must also be allowed to express themselves freely, and genocide fear must not be used to curtail free speech and also a justification for arrest. As for Kenya, a country in East Africa, which is also the largest economy in that region, the world is holding its breath because of fear of violent scenes that took place in Kenya in 2007 and 2009. It is only hoped that both candidates will be able to jettison inflammatory languages or acts that are susceptible of sparking violence. But the murder of the head of the digital wing of the Independent Electoral and Boundary Commission sets an ugly template that no one wants to see again. The only solution is for those susceptible or suspected of having orchestrated the dastardly acts should be arrested and punished publicly. Well, that was our point of view here on the two countries, that is Rwanda and Kenya. Both countries will be organizing their presidential elections. The first, Rwanda, that is tomorrow, August 4th, and while the second will be 4 days after, that is on the 8th of August. Now, let me turn over to you, Mr. Ferdinand. You are a person, as I introduce you, you understand African affairs very well. Now, tell us, let's first of all come on Rwanda. Why is it that too often people only, when we talk about democracy, human rights, those tampering with their constitution, as it is the custom in Central Africa or East Africa, or anyway, Central Africa, people don't talk about Paul Kagame. They talk about Sassou Nguesso, Pierre Nkurunziza, Kabila, Paul Biya, but everybody seems to kind of ignore Paul Kagame. Why that?
I think the two things, there are two factors. The first is that he came to power through a coup d'etat, but the average person in Rwanda sees some progress. Somehow, the people feel better amenities, better schools. From primary school, you have what they call one child per computer. Gives progress. Most of the schools there are constructed to use solar energy. So in the hinterlands, they have basic services. Basic services are everywhere. The roads, the hospitals, schools. It's quite interesting. And he's on the path to progress. What is more interesting is that coming to power, he succeeded in cutting the colonial court with France and Belgium. And people are happy. We're expecting other African countries to copy it. What is also more interesting is that apparently he may be a dictator, but he does not steal. We have seen African leaders use dictatorship and put in place a mechanism for tribalism and embezzlement, because any dictatorship has as prime role to enable the colonial masters pay colonial taxes.
Yeah.
They don't really embezzle for themselves.
Yeah, but you are full of a lot of praise for Mr. Paul Kagame. But then when you look at the amnesty report of 2017, that is this year,
Yes.
on the 3rd of May, 2007, there's a lady called Diane Wigara,
Yes.
who was outspoken and wanted to present herself or as, wanted to stand as president. But what we saw was that nude picture of herself was found over the social media all over the place. You also have the case of a certain Jean Damascene Habarugira, who also was intimidated and forced to leave the competition. And you just have this, I have no problem against Frank, but it's an unknown figure standing against Paul Kagame. It means that Paul Kagame is really not like a dictator, he's really a dictator. Don't you think so?
Yes, we have to, in my humble opinion as an African, I expect my country in the future, after this president, to have some sort of enlightened despotism. Why do I say so?
Yeah.
There are prerequisites for development in Africa. If you don't remove the colonial yoke, it's a problem. Coming to the case of Kagame, it's unfortunate that it moves along with a curtail of human rights and other rights.
Abuses.
Yes, it's a problem. But the question we should ask is, the opponents who, because of threats, are on exile or cannot stand against Kagame.
Yeah.
If they are candidates against Kagame, can they win?
Well, the thing is, they cannot win because, for example, the case of Frank, according to Bloomberg, he went somewhere, I've forgotten the city, to make a kind of political rally. Only children came up because if you turn up, you risk being arrested. So people just don't want to challenge Kagame.
Since it's going to be a single ballot,
yes,
I hope the people will express their various opinions in the ballot booth.
But the last time, I think 2010, he got 93%, whereas in Rwanda today, all the Hutu is a large prison.
Yes.
Most in Gebira, one of the candidates, she's in jail.
Yes.
So you think, if I understand yourself, is that you need an enlightened dictator like Paul Kagame to someone like Paul Biya, Denis Sassou Nguesso, or Joseph Kabila?
No, I don't condone people being in prison.
Yes.
Well, how do they call those courts? The Gashasha.
Gashasha, yes.
Yes. For some reason, it delays their judgments, which is unfortunate. Well, there's been some sort of reconciliation, which is not total, probably imposed out of fear. He was supposed to, these people have served more than 20 years in prison. It's enough. There are no more threats to him. So for me, he should continue with the court sessions, then they shame the people and then free them.
Okay.
For genuine reconciliation.
For genuine reconciliation.
So everything is not perfect.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt, but let me ask you another question, because you said somewhere that you need to free yourself from colonial yoke.
Yes.
Are you in a way saying that since he is somehow banners up against France, against Belgium, it's a good thing, and you think that other African leaders, especially those of French-speaking Africa, should copy the same, or what is your opinion?
It's a prerequisite. It's a prerequisite for these African countries to move ahead. They need to cut that umbilical cord. It's indispensable. We can, the IMF and World Bank can give you figures, economic growth in Cameroon, in Congo, and so on. But in the end, these countries produce petrol. The amount of petrol produced is never known. In Congo, you have places where the president has no right to even reach there. In Cameroon, what is produced as oil, nobody can give you statistics. SNS will just tell you a contract of sharing, production and sharing. Nobody masters what goes on.
Okay.
Formerly, Elf and Total, they have done wonders. Today, they're still doing wonders. God alone knows what happens.
Okay, that's the reason why people close. Anyway, one example with Congo Republic, for example, there is a province that they call a department called the Lekumu, which is about the size of Rwanda.
Yes.
And has about 100,000 inhabitants. Rwanda has 12 million. Yes. But the paradox is that Rwanda is exporting cassava to Congo-Brazzaville, whereas Congo-Brazzaville it's a tropical land where you can do farming. Well, but then now Kagame will stand, and there are chances that he's going to be around right up to 2034.
Yes.
Don't you think that no matter how good he is in terms of economic management, he's transforming his country, it's going to be too much for him to stay till that time?
I have no problem with that. Even in this country, if Paul Biya genuinely wins in the box, I have no problem with it.
But in Rwanda, he intimidates people. That's what.
That is the only the other problem.
Yes.
As an African, I also have a problem with his management style. He benefits a lot from the crisis in DRC. He helps the colonial masters to have undue advantages and benefits from the minerals
in the DRC.
Yes, it's a big problem.
It's a big problem.
They export minerals they don't produce.
They don't. Okay, so which means that somehow Kagame might stand as though he's an anti-colonialist, but somehow, he's an appendage of the colonialists to plunder the DRC.
Yes, that is clear. But I'm very happy in April he signed an accord with the DRC to exploit some joint oil around the borders.
Around the borders.
Yes, I hope with time. Because the pretext has always been that the Hutu rebels are still in DRC. So he keeps some military presence at the DRC to intimidate his people and then go across, steal resources. How he comes to reconcile all of that to the good work he has done in his country leaves a lot to be desired. I hope he finally leaves the DRC alone and does some trade with them.
He finally leaves the DRC alone and does some trade with them.
But to end with Rwanda.
Yes.
As an African, I hope we don't focus too much on Rwanda.
Yes. Why?
For the simple reason that we had a Warsaw case in Burundi. Nobody talks about Burundi.
Okay, but in this program, we are going to come on Burundi. Okay. So are you trying to think that there's kind of Rwanda bashing, a fixation on Rwanda at the expense of Burundi?
It is normal. It is normal. I expected a heat that was put on Nkurunziza to continue. You have human rights violations there. What it calls elections are not elections. They're a disgrace to Africa.
They're a disgrace to Africa. Okay, I think if the Rwandans are watching you, they will also tell you that what is happening, their border called Rwanda, is also a disgrace. When someone like Paul Kagame can live with 93%.
If it's genuine, fine.
If it's genuine.
Yes.
But why do you think that Rwanda's own case can be genuine and Paul Nkurunziza won't be genuine?
Well, I admit there's a lot of pressure on opposition leaders in Rwanda. But for the case of Burundi, they kill.
They kill. Okay, yes, we know that in Burundi there has been a lot of killing there,
Yes.
carried
You
out.
have death squads.
Death squad supposedly financed and sustained by Pierre Nkurunziza. Now we'll be focusing still on an East African country, that is Kenya. And before that, let's go back and ask Roland to players we'll be having, except of the rallies of Raila Odinga of not Jubilee is Uhuru Kenyatta, but let's first of all begin with Raila Odinga, who is the flag bearer or the standard bearer of a coalition that is made up of Raila Odinga and Kalonzo Musyoka, known there as the NASA coalition. So if it is ready there, let's watch it together, and immediately after that, we'll be having Uhuru Kenyatta.
My colleague has already read the statement, but this plot follows a meeting that took in State House, and there is correspondence to that effect. Following the CDF notice of meeting with the State House and State House representative, and subsequent meeting with Sunray, as a code name, the undersigned has been directed to inform you to coordinate the following key activities. A, make available on standby for the period between 3rd and 16th July 36 officers of ranks of major or captain, and considering infantry composition of these officers. So this letter goes on to give a lot of details of what is subsequent to the meeting that took place in State House. So this is something that has been sanctioned at the very top, because this is coming from the CDF himself, giving instructions now to junior officers to do what we are talking about. So this is no longer just hearsay, but this is letter signed on his behalf by Mr. R.D. Muye, Lieutenant Colonel, and is signing for the commander. So this is not just hearsay. Each time we talked about this matter, they've said we're just talking. But today we are giving you detailed information which confirms what we have been talking about, that there is a sinister plan to use the military to interfere with the electoral process. We want a confirmation that we are going to have elections in this country. There's no point in us making all the elaborate arrangements that we've been making, campaigning, when somebody wants to shortchange the whole process through the back door. This is not going to be acceptable. The Kenyan people will not accept it. Neither, I hope, will the international community.
Well, you have heard there Mr. Raila Odinga expressing some doubts on the credibility of the Kenyan elections. We are going to be very objective because we're bringing in Uhuru, but I want you to just chip in a word on that. When you hear a leading opposition candidate such as Raila Odinga, former prime minister, voicing reservation on the credibility of this Kenyan election that's going to come up on the 8th of this month. What is your take on that?
I'm not surprised. Raila Odinga was candidate in 2002. He cried foul in 2007, cried foul in 2013. He may cry foul now.
Okay, which means that Do you think that the fear of the international community, that everybody holding their breath, that we might see the same violent scenarios?
I'm not sure they are afraid of the international community, because the president had a summons, has appeared in front of the ICC, the vice president, William Ruto, Raila Odinga, and they came out clean. For the first time, I saw Africans went to the ICC and came out clean. So surprising.
Perhaps the ICC never had sufficient proof to indict them. That's why
1,500 people were killed between the proclamation of the results in 2007, 2009. 600,000 people were displaced. We had gangs that killed people from both sides, and they came out clean.
So are you in a way trying to say the ICC was kind of partial?
Other reports tell you that international companies, various interests from the Middle East and the West, have invested billions and billions in tourism, transport industry, and other industries. They will not want violence again. They always look for a compromise. Let me tell you, the violence in 2007 was provoked when Raila Odinga, a few days to the proclamation of the results, came out clear that there were attempts to steal his votes, 300,000 votes. In the end, President
Kenyatta.
Kibaki. He won with less than 300,000 votes. That is what caused the violence.
Okay.
Apparently, the elections were not very free. But more disturbing, elections in Kenya have always been on tribal lines. Raila is from the Luo tribe.
Uhuru.
And it's from the Kikuyu.
Kikuyu.
Yeah, that is the main problem.
And the Kikuyu seems, if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, they're the majority, right?
They're the majority. They have hard power. It will also appear that there's a second problem, that of poor governance between the rich and the poor, to the extent that each tribe thinks that my champion can build us out of this thing. Okay. The whole political situation is tribalized. Okay. So we needed the force of Councillor Rice, and Kofi Annan in 2008 to force a coalition government. Let me give you the particularities of the Kenyan government.
Yes.
It is, I think, the only English-speaking country in Africa where you have a president, vice president, and a prime minister.
Is that not a way to try to share the national cake and trying to appease the competing tribal or regional forces?
Thank you. The basis for future conflict were laid in 2008. Instead of going out for probably transitional period for new elections, Councillor Rice and Kofi Annan decided on sharing the cake to the extent that Raila Odinga was prime minister. His opponent of today was his vice. It was so complex. And 2-3 years after, there was conflict and conflict. 2013 elections did not help matters. This tribal tendency of politics continues in Kenya. It's going to be very dangerous.
It's going to be very dangerous. Now, let's also watch together all these. We are getting courtesy our sister television in East Africa, a campaign rally by the incumbent Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta.
Tumeweka shilingi milioni 400 kuimarisha vifaa vya hospitali. Tatu za Malili na hizo zingine zimetajwa na Konza, tayari hiyo inakuwa printi. Tumesema serikali ilipe ndio wananchi wapatiwe bila malipo. Wenzetu tayari Konza City headquarters ndio hiyo imeanza. Tayari tumenegotiate na serikali ya South Korea Serikali ya South Korea is going to be the first institutional investor in Konza City. Hiyo ni kazi kwa vijana. Infrastructure ya Konza City tayari imeanza. Mimi siongei ile mtu hawezi kwenda kujionea na macho. Naelewana? It is moving on. Lakini nyinyi watu kama kwenu mmekulwa na hiyo kitu ya kila mara kuambiwa story from way atwe sijui nini mnazungumzwa hapa. Hiyo hamwezi mkule. I'm telling you. Na mimi nataka niwahakikishie, sisi tunawaomba kura, hatulazimishi. Nyinyi mtapiga pahali mtataka. Tunaelewana? Lakini sisi tunawaambia huyo mtu ya kitendawili safari hii tutamsort na tutamsort. Unaelewa vile nawaambia jamani? Wacha apige story yake ya magazeti, wacha apige story yake ati anaibiwa, wacha apige story yake ile anapiga, wacha aendelee na matusi. Mimi namwambianga matusi haitanisababisha nikose kulala, nitalala usiku na niendelee na kazi. Tunaelewana wenzangu? Lakini nawaambia kitendawili safari hii ataenda nyumbani na ataenda nyumbani. Na ndipo mnasikia nikiambia mwenzangu Kalonzo, najua ni mtoto yenu, najua na nampenda. Mimi namwambianga jamani, wewe ndio tufanye kazi tuendeleshe Kenya hii. Wachana na hii mambo ya kitendawili. Huyu mtu akupeleki mahali. Na mimi sisemi yale mimi nimeunda, naongea yale yeye mwenyewe alinifundisha. Ya kwamba huyu mtu hakuna pahali anapeleka watu. Tunaelewana wenzangu? Tunaelewana? Baje tulete maji, tuendelee kuongeza stima, tujenge barabara, Uhuru waende retire 2022, washikane na huyu jamaa William Ruto waendelee na kazi. Tunaelewana? Wawachane na mastori mingi. Mastori mingi hakuna mahali naenda. Hakuna mahali naenda. Hata ninaona wakubwa hapa naona nyuso zao kwa sababu wote ni wakodi hao. Najua. Naona walipatiwa kazi na wale wengine.
You know, in Kenya, was the thing before thick of equity. We had the declaration initially of Raila Odinga. Now we have this campaign of the incumbent Uhuru Kenyatta, and it is entirely in Swahili. For those of us who are here in West Africa that we speak only English or French, that's a very good thing to have an indigenous African language being spoken. Now there is another allegation that is, no matter, well, a kind of not so rosy report of the outgoing regime, that is the government of Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto. There is this problems or recurring problem of corruption. Don't you think that even though the polls show that nobody is going to come out outright victorious during the first round, don't you think Raila Odinga has a kind of advantage because this government is being accused of flagrant and monumental acts of corruption?
Well, the corruption is both ways. I saw BBC reports, doctored, faked, giving the impression that the incumbent has a lead of about 5 to 10 points.
Yeah, and I think the BBC had to even come out to refute that fake BBC report, right?
Yes. Apparently, I see the candidates, Uhuru and Raila Odinga, they both appear very desperate. They want to win at all costs. Let's not forget, the head of the computer division of the electoral listing,
Mr. Mansondo,
was abducted and killed after 3 days. Before then, the vice president, William Ruto, was attacked, and assailant was killed. What's going on? What's going on? From the Odinga camp, they tell you, no, that's your game. So the vice president, in fact, was not killed. Somebody was just killed.
A kind of setup.
Some kind of setup.
Do you now believe that William Ruto or the Jubilee camp should be so vicious to a point that they will set up a kind of attack on themselves?
I don't know. I hope it does not happen like that. The question we are asking as Africans is, how free can this vote be? To ensure that the loser accepts defeat and spare us violence after the elections. That is the fear we have. Because the tribal speech is very wild there. How do we calm it down in such a way that the loser believes that he has been beaten in the box? That's the difficulty we have. I have seen over the years the African Union will send observers. I've never heard of any genuine report, because by the time they are leaving Cameroon and other countries, they go to the presidency to give their report. They leave from there with gadgets, diamond gadgets, iron gadgets, gold gadgets. In the end, the report never helps
To
genuine observers, genuine citizens on how to improve the process. So, Kenya has had 2 difficult elections. This is a third. How do they avoid the pitfalls of 2007,
that is the grand question.
2013, and this one, which is electrically charged?
Electrically charged. Well, we would have wanted to have the editor of the digital part or digital wing of the main, or I think it's a pro-government newspaper in Kenya, The Nation, Mr. Churchill. We would have wanted to have Churchill Otieno to give us his perspective on the election. That is Mr. Churchill Otieno on the screen. He is the editor of the online version of The Nation in Kenya, but due to poor communications between Douala, Cameroon, and Nairobi in Kenya, his interview, we can't have him live, nor the interview that he sent via social media, so we can't have Otieno. But before that, we had our reporter, Kejang Henry Atembe, who went to Nairobi and went down the streets of the Kenyan capital to have the impression of Kenyans before this election takes place, that is on the 8th of August. So if our technicians are ready, let's have an excerpt of the interview that Kejang Henry Atembe had on the streets of Nairobi to find out what or how the Kenyans are preparing for August 8th general elections.
A change. We want this regime to be removed. We need a new team who can focus for the development of the country, the issue of youth to get employment and infrastructures. But the outgoing regime was having a lot of issues of corruption. That's why we don't have faith in them, because it is known, even a standard 2 child knows what is happening in today's government. Kenyans, I think they are very much clever. They are wise. It is unlike the olden days. They know how they're supposed to vote, because whatever is happening in the country is well known by everybody. I think they should vote for a change, a real change.
I'm ready for the election. I'm going to vote.
If I should ask, who is your candidate?
My candidate, I'm the one who knows my candidate.
So you don't want to reveal your candidate?
I don't want. I know my candidate.
And you know your candidate will win?
Yes, he must win.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I think, on my opinion, I can say that most of the youths have been engaged in other activities. Like you get, they're getting more into drugs and other substances. So you find that most of them are just interested in getting shortcuts to cash, and they are not people who maybe are interested in another side that will take them a long cut to get to the resources they need. Yes, personally I'm ready. I'm a registered member this side, though I don't come from this area. But I found it necessary for me to register this area because I'll not find time to go back home.
Yes, I am. I only wish that they would do more as ladies, fight some more to get those seats.
Why not move into the apex? You don't want to. You
No
see,
one can-
the youths, we are statistically informed that they constitute about 70%, but we don't find them in politics. Very few youths, but you still keep accusing the elderly people, and you say you want to move them. So what is wrong?
I don't see anything wrong, but me as a youth, I feel I should be somewhere. Because if you find most youths along the street, they are educated, they have papers, but you find the elderly people are the people who still at the offices, and if you want to go and look for a job, there's this thing called corruption. So as me, what I'm thinking of, the government should employ a certain CS who is head of the corruption, because I don't see anything.
But I think President Uhuru is doing something to put up a anti-corruption fight.
Like what has he done? Now the Kenya is going down. The economy is growing up. It's going down. So what should we do? There's nothing he has done. He has only done a lot in the infrastructure. That one we can say he has worked. But things dealing with employing youth empowerment, he has totally done nothing. And I'm telling you this for free. He has done nothing.
Population or percentage of unemployment, youth employment?
He has done nothing. Like now, how many companies in the Kenya are being closed? And that are youth, they should be employed. And you find a lot of, more than 100,000, 100 companies are being closed. So where are the youths? Where are they going? What will they do?
But there are no policies put in place to make sure youths are self-employed. You can create companies now?
No, we don't have any. Can you tell me one great company that we have? We don't have. We don't have any company here. Like now, if you go to Mombasa Road, they are not, even if you go to industrial area. Youths are down there. People are there waiting for jobs. And the job is not there. So what should we do?
And so what is the way forward, if you should propose?
The way forward is now the people of the Kenya to decide and choose a young and good, vibrant leaders who knows what we feel. We don't just go and pick a leader. We know the leader what we want. If he can comply with what we want, is okay. But if he cannot, he should step aside.
Well, that was there, our reporter, Kejang Henry Atembe, our editor, in fact, who was in Nairobi to find out the impression of Kenyans prior to the elections. So you saw the young man at the end there is has just shredded the chances of Uhuru. Uhuru has done nothing, right? No work, youth are unemployed, which means that is something Raila has a field day.
No, he talks of infrastructure.
Infrastructure.
Yes.
But Uhuru has 5 years to develop the infrastructure, but there are nothing, no jobs in Mombasa. Children, as he said, youth are just there idling around.
Let's look at it this way. If Uhuru, anyway, he gives a solution. If Uhuru
Yes.
had the means to bring progress, and he has not done it, from what I hear, corruption and so on, is problematic. In principle, they should vote against him. Don't forget, Odinga has been around the corridor of power. And let's not forget, let nobody deceive you. These elections are going to be on tribal lines. Well, if you listen to the candidates, they tell you about a few things they will do. But their programs are secondary.
Which means that the problem is themselves, no program for the people, and which means that that young man who is speaking, he wanted even a young person to represent them, which means the preoccupation of the people of Kenya are not taken into consideration by both candidates.
No, their problem is not themselves. The problem is their tribes, who are very loyal to them. Their tribes and nothing but their tribes.
Not their tribe and nothing but their tribe. But I would like you to watch another interview that Kejang did. This time around, it was interesting it will be very interesting for you to watch. Okay. It is that of the government spokesman of Kenya, Mr. Eric Kiriathi, that Kejang Henry Atembe had an opportunity to have a long interview with him, and I think it is going to be very interesting for Cameroonians. First of all, what interests me was that you have a government spokesman who speaks openly, yes. And then the rest, as we generally say, let's watch, or I don't want to say the devil is in the details, but let's listen to him That interview was realized in Kenya by Henry Kenyan Atembe when he went there for this special report.
1 minute, sir. Yes, 60 seconds, sir. You said something very interesting, which is applicable in every society. Yes. Politicians will come and go, but the police will remain to guarantee, to protect the people of their property, etc. A very powerful statement there from you. Yes. Beyond that, how is that guaranteed? How is the security guaranteed for free, fair, transparent, credible electoral process?
What has happened is that police are continuing reviewing their operational plans. They are looking at all the possible scenarios during elections where law can be broken or the right of the others abused, or kind of scenarios which can deprive this country of free, fair, democratic and credible process, and putting up proactive measures and also designing response measures to ensure that that does not happen.
The Kenyan colleague asked the question about the measures, the electoral process, the independent electoral governing body. How have you all been updated with the process?
We are working in conjunction and in support of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, but we don't want to take over their communications. They are independent by law, and therefore the nitty-gritties, their operational matters, their policy matters, we would want to keep that of what we were calling upon other institutions of governance, other constitutional bodies, private citizens, civil society, is to ensure that we are working in support of that commission, because elections are very, very critical in giving legitimacy to a civilized democracy.
Lastly, sir, we understand that you talked about ethics, and which is very capital, ethics in this particular dispensation, whatever the country. And have you put up measures to make sure that there are no political insults that might trigger conflicts and so on? That is respect, knowing that the two camps are NASA and the Jubilee camp. So that avoiding the Jubilee camp to attack NASA, avoiding NASA to attack Jubilee.
Well, there is a certain level of poetic license allowed in political discourse. And unless the utterances are likely to incite violence, we wouldn't want to be unnecessarily restrictive of the freedom of expression during this process. But we are telling politicians, by the way, what is visible is NASA and Jubilee. But in between, inside there in the grassroots, there is a lot of competition between candidate versus candidate, even in the same party. And in that, there is likely to be a lot of conflict, but we are telling people they must operate within the law.
The spokesman of the Kenyan government, Mr. Elie Kiriathi, there in an exclusive interview with our own Henry Kenyan Atembe, trying to put the guidelines. And what struck me was that he said people are free to express themselves openly and that the police are taking precautionary measures to avoid a repeat of or people excesses. And what is your take as a Cameroonian on the allegation or the comments made by Mr. Kariathi?
I think they're probably in heaven, we're in hell. He's so soft. He tells you they're going to leave the commission with its communication and its work. They are going to avoid restricting freedom of speech. We're in a country whereby political party leaders are not free to express their opinions, are not free to organize rallies and meetings, They're not free to even hold at times meetings in their own offices. It's real progress. I hope what he says is really what obtains on the ground. It's quite interesting.
But the irony that he said that, but now we have the case of Chris Msondo, the head of the computerized section, whatever how they call it, of the Independent Electoral and Boundary Commission, has been killed,
Yes.
tortured before being killed, and now, which is so bad. Do you think
the
that
vice president was attacked?
attacked? Good, you see that. Well, people seem to have ignored that aspect. The vice president was attacked.
Yes.
Someone killed there. I think the assailant was one of the assailant was killed.
Yeah.
Don't you think that it kind of set the template of violence after August 8th?
You are very right. We are going to have massive elections in Kenya. You are going to have local elections, parliamentary elections, and regional elections. On top of that, you have presidential elections. I was reading a paper today. The primaries in the various parties in Kenya were very bitter. So don't just look at the presidential elections.
Are you meaning bitter? There was
A lot of acrimony.
a lot of acrimony. Yeah.
Yes, there in certain places, urban areas, a lot of money changed hands. They were not very fair inside the party structures. So you are going to see the consequences. So
Well, that if the competition was very fierce within the ruling Jubilee party
fierce and a bit corrupt
and a bit corrupt
in both parties.
in both parties, all
both
right.
leading parties.
Oh, great. So, because
is-
my question would have been,
Yeah.
if it was fierce, highly contested,
Yes.
and then controversial at the end, perhaps it might play in favor of the opposition, which is the NASA coalition led by Raila Odinga.
We have said on this program, and we have said, money is circulating.
Okay.
In whose favor?
In whose favor? But let me try to inform our viewer that in the Kenyan presidential election, president is elected using a modified version of the two-round system. In order to win in the first round, a candidate is required to receive over 50% of the vote and 25% of the vote in at least 24 counties.
Yes.
Isn't that quite complicated?
It's complicated, which means that the elected president should represent the greatest good, the biggest majority of people. I think it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Complicated, yes. I was also reading the candidates authorized for presidential elections. You can spend up to about $50 million.
$50 million.
That's about
And, wow, that's quite a lump sum.
32 billion.
CFA francs.
Yes.
Wow. And the other thing is the 337 members of the National Assembly are elected by two methods.
Yes.
That is, 290 are elected in a single member constituencies
24.
by first past the post voting, and then you have the remaining 47 are reserved for women.
That's very interesting.
That's very interesting.
Yes.
Okay. Now, okay, I would like us, before going to the end of this program, to have, this is world views, but we'll be having a review of Africa and world news, that's extra African news. This one is prepared courtesy Albert Etundi.
In Kenya, the elections official whose body was found earlier this week had been severely tortured and strangled to death, as found after an autopsy. Chris Sando had deep scratches and cuts on his back hand, as reported by the chief government's pathologist. Sando was in charge of Kenya's computerized voting system. In Rwanda, 3 candidates are battling to become the next president of Rwanda. Incumbent President Paul Kagame, representing the ruling party RPF, Frank Hebeneza of Green Party of Rwanda, and Philip Mpaimana, an independent candidate previously unknown on the political sphere. All the other opposition parties, which are 8 in total, have decided not to put forward a candidate for this election. Instead, they have decided to back President Kagame, making it more likely for him to win. The opposition leaders have complained that their supporters have been intimidated and also accused some local authorities of undermining their complaints. Paul Kagame is promising security, stability, and continued economic growth, and denies all accusations of wrongdoing. Frank Habineza pledges improving land ownership, housing for armed forces, while Mpaimana says he will improve infrastructure in rural areas and provide better access to health care. 3 men and 1 favorite in the battle to grab the presidential seat. Out of Africa, Venezuela has for months been barreling deeper into crisis amid daily street protests, violence and economic collapse that has left many struggling to survive. On Sunday last week, a controversial vote was held that could change the future of oil-rich South American nation. Voters were to elect 364 members, with 181 chosen by committee representing social sectors, including workers and indigenous people. For President Nicolas Maduro, voters were to elect 364 members, with 181 chosen by committee representing social sectors, including workers and indigenous people. For President Nicolas Maduro, the vote to elect an assembly to rewrite the constitution to bring back stability to a country in chaos, but which critics brand an authoritarian power grab. This political crisis has consumed the nation since the opposition won control of the National Assembly in 2015. The opposition, backed by much of international community, as well as Venezuela's rebel Attorney General Luisa Ortega Diaz, reportedly said Constituent Assembly will cement Venezuela's transition to a dictatorship. Critics say it will lead to a Cuban-style Congress, but Mr. Maduro insists that it puts power in the hands of the people as never before. Sunday's election does witness chaos, as at least 16 people were killed in a violent altercation between the opposition and the forces of law and order.
Well, that is on that note that we will be putting an end to this program for today. But then I would like you to have a final word on your assessment on the Rwandan election. Well, we know it's a kind of Kagame has won already because they don't have any kind of rivalry. There's no suspense. He's going to have maybe 93% again. Now, whether a suspense is in Kenya, what is your own critical assessment of what is going to happen on the 8th?
As an African, I just hope that we can have free and fair elections. It will be unfortunate if fraud or any electoral malpractices can spark trouble there.
Okay.
We may leave the 2007 to 2009
spectacle.
Yes, it will be so unfortunate. I expect the African Union to go there now, preach peace and transparency.
Well, that's kind of wishful thinking because we've not yet seen where the African Union has done anything. You talked about Burundi. The African Union made a bluff of sending 5,000 peacekeeping soldiers there, and it never happened. Anyway, to round off our program today, as I do regularly, there is a very good book that I would like to share with you. It's an old book written in 1975 by a certain Jonathan Derrick, and the title of the book is what you have on screen. It's a very, very good book that I recommend most Africans to read. It is entitled, I think, yeah, you have it on your screen there, Africa's Slave Today. Africa's Slaves Today is a book that explains about, talked about slavery in Africa. There you will understand that, for example, here in Cameroon, 2 tribes contributed in facilitating slavery, the Douala people and the Kalabari people on the coast of Ndian and Nigeria. And that you also understand that when you are in Douala and you have a place, a neighborhood called Bali, it is not by chance. That was where most people from the west region and northwest region who were brought down to the coast to be marketed were first of all stuck before taking that journey over the America. So it's a very good book for all of you to read. Well, it is where we put an end to this edition of Worldviews today. If you have comments and critiques to pose, send it to us. Next week we shall be focusing on Liberia, where Ellen Johnson Sirleaf is living, but then will it be an opportunity for George Oponweya to be elected? Well, let's wait and see. I want to thank you very much, Mr. Ferdinand Ndifor, for having accepted our invitation.
Thank you very much.
Well, it is on that note that we'll say quit, but please do not go away. Stay tuned for more programs here on Canal de English, and don't go away.